Welcome to the Summer of Stories, an interview series that goes behind the brands of entrepreneurs who were the first to do it in their families, communities, and/or industries, and uncovers the stories that embolden them to get it done. I'm Gabrielle Gwyneth, a brand storyteller, and this is the finale, a special solo episode where I'm going to revisit powerful moments from our incredible guests and share insights on how you can use storytelling to increase your visibility, grow your audience, and elevate your brand. Now, I came up with the idea for this series because I genuinely love stories, learning other people's stories, and I know how powerful they are for getting people bought into a mission, raising awareness about an offer, a mission, a brand. And I also wanted to increase my own brand awareness. So it was a mix of me being able to demonstrate what I'm always teaching to my clients, to my community, and also a way for me to highlight some of the amazing entrepreneurs that I have met in the last couple of years. And if you've been watching along from the beginning, then you know, or even just one or two episodes, then you've been entertained, you've been inspired and motivated by the stories. So that aspect, check, good, great job. It's done, it's successful. But when it comes to the other aspect, the way that the stories are actually working, this is the episode where I'm going to explain that to you, where we get into some of the concepts that made the series so effective so that you can apply them to your own branding. Now, I had 9 guests over the series, and I'm not going to go into each episode. What I've done is chosen the top 3 performers, and by top 3 performers, I mean the ones that had the most views across the platforms where I streamed. So that was LinkedIn and YouTube. And we'll talk about what made them effective, what storytelling tips you can take away from those interviews and use in your brand. So these are in no particular order, but the first guest that I'm going to highlight is Giorgio Knowles. Now, Giorgio is the founder of the very first Bahamian watch brand, Lukairi, and he also founded a clothing brand, Conscience Clothing. He's a serial entrepreneur, so he's done multiple businesses, and today he works with his family in their private school, and he's also a real estate mogul in the making. So we had an incredible conversation. I had so much fun. I learned so much about Giorgio. I've known him a long, long time, but as would be the case in these sorts of conversations, you uncover things that you didn't actually know when you ask intentional questions, which is a bonus tip that just came to me for you when you're wanting to develop stories for yourself and in conversations where you want to get good stories out of people, is to ask intentional questions. But with Giorgio's story, we talked a lot about his willingness to sacrifice in order to reach his goals and the sacrifices that he made to reach his goals. He started out as an entrepreneur when he was in his teenage years. As a young man, his very first job wasn't actually a job, it was a business as an entertainer, as a party host. And he got his family, his friends together, and they created a company called PBA, I think is the name. And they used that to throw parties. And by the time he got out of high school, one, I guess you could say he was hooked on entrepreneurship. And two, they were making a lot of money and being able to fund, whatever things they needed as high schoolers. So there were highs in Giorgio's journey. He is very well known in the Bahamian community, and it's because of the success of his businesses. But there were also lows. And we talked about how, for instance, with Conscience Clothing, which was his next venture, how he had stacks of clothes, of hoodies, t-shirts, hats for the brand in his room. He had no space for anything other than the clothes and his body to sleep, to go to bed. And that was a metaphor, for instance, of how much he gave and how much the business was taking from him because he sacrificed friendship, time with family, potential romantic relationships that maybe the timing wouldn't have been right, or anyway, it just wasn't his priority. And so Giorgio really demonstrated through telling his story and emphasized as he told the story that when you're a pioneer, remember that was the theme for all of the guests, is going first. When you're whether you're a pioneer or not, when you're building something, especially let's say when you're doing something that no one else has done so they can't relate, you have to be willing to make sacrifices. And another low that came up was Giorgio getting robbed. He had the very first Bahamian watch brand, as I said, and it was a huge success. He got prime spot, prime real estate in a luxury boutique in the heart of the center of the city for his watch brand, the very first Bahamian to do so. He was featured in newspapers. He was flown around the country for people to buy the watch from him. It was incredible. I remember those days looking out and admiring Giorgio from the outside. And there was a moment that I didn't know about until our interview where he shared that he was away from his home one day and he was robbed of the watches and the, I think, blueprints. I don't think that's the right word, but for designs that he wanted to make and his materials for maintaining the watches, which he did by hand for the store where they were kept. And it just knocked the wind out of him, took the energy out of his sales. So Giorgio's story was really effective because we had the excitement of the highs and we had the truth, the reality, the lows. And the tip that I want you to take away from this interview is that it's important to share your challenges and your sacrifices, if they exist, which they likely do, because they make the story more compelling. They make people sit on the edge of the seat and wonder, what did you do after that? What happened? And that moment of intrigue, the curiosity, keeps people going. So that's Giorgio Knowles, if you want to look up his interview. The next interview we're going to talk about is Amandine. Amandine Ayala is a French woman who's lived actually all over the world and is currently based in Spain, where she runs her bespoke cannabis-based tea company. Actually, I think she says hemp-based teas, and an animal sanctuary. So our interview had a dual function or dual pathway because we talked about how she developed her hemp tea business, her hemp tea brand called Blue Mémoire, and then more recently, how she developed her animal sanctuary, Chez Amandine. So that was fun. We got to hear about just the role of tea in her self-care and this, again, another hard, dark time in her life that inspired this beautiful company that she now runs. And then how she got to develop Chez Amandine and the amazing journey that she went on to make that happen. So I met Amandine a couple of years ago and we worked together on her stories. And that was how I learned about the love that she had for animals and how it went back to her very childhood and how she's always dreamed of having an animal sanctuary. So last year, when she started asking for help to purchase a property, talking about how there was an opportunity for her to develop this farm in Spain, I was so happy for her, as I'm sure everyone else was, and really admired the perseverance and the gumption that I saw her put into bringing Chez Amandine to life. So she found this property, as I said, but needed help to fund the purchase. And that was what her GoFundMe campaign was for. And she showed up day after day, after week, after month to get the funds that she needed to be able to make the down payment. And we talked not only about what that was like, but also what it's like now on the other side of her dreams, where she's living on this farm. She has goats and donkeys, which you could actually hear braying in the background of our interview. And she has chickens that she has to feed. And she's learning about, farm maintenance, because animals are one thing, but actually fixing fences and water is another. So what does it mean when you achieve your dreams? It was a really dynamic interview, as I said already. And there were so many different aspects that were interesting and made you really feel like you could see what Amandine was seeing and experience what she experienced. Which leads me to my second tip, which is to use vivid descriptions in order to bring your story to life. So we discussed the sunshine, the warmth, the actual animals. It helped that you could hear the donkeys braying in the background because it helped us to not just hear the details of the story or to know, yes, Amandine did X, she did Y, she did Z, but to imagine ourselves in that landscape. And that is what you want for your clients, for your community, to be able to see themselves in your story. And when you use vivid descriptions, you use adjectives, you don't shy away from sharing the details that help, that take the story to the next level, that's what you're doing. You're creating an opportunity for people to feel themselves in the story with you. And then we have the third interview. The third tip that I'm going to share comes from my interview with Judge Carol, who, full disclosure, and by the way, is my mother. But her interview, oh my gosh, it was actually the most wildly successful. And it may be in part because she is actually a local celebrity in the Bahamas. And so lots of people were interested in hearing how she got the very first court TV show of the Bahamas onto the air. So not only a woman court TV show, but the first court TV show, period. Now, Judge Carol had an illustrious career as a lawyer and a judge, a legit judge, 30 plus years long. She's worked in the public sector, in the private sector, in multiple levels of government, and was very well respected. And then one day decided she wanted to have a TV show. So our interview was very focused on that process, on how she went from idea to now, actually, as I'm filming this, the season 2 has just aired. So when we did the interview, she'd just done season 1 and had finished filming season 2, but now season 2 is even on the air. So what was that journey like for her? And similar to the conversation that I had with Giorgio, and actually also shout out to the conversation that I had with James Virgil, we talked about the no's that she heard and how she tried and tried again, and just the strategies that she adopted after she heard no. She went and asked for funding. You know, she had a business plan, asked for funding for the business plan, and people loved the idea, but they weren't ready to invest at the time. And so she decided to take another tack and go public in a different way to raise her profile so that she had a better brand asset to lay on the table among her other assets for potential investors or for networks to sign on with her. And also she created other things completely on faith for her show. She created the set, she got curtains, she had the podium made and a particular logo, and she had her jingle, all of this stuff she had done without yet having a signed contract. So it was like, whoa, one of those stories where you hear people doing all this stuff on faith. And then the great payoff, which is that she won the contract and she had series 1 completely done, as I said, when we were having our conversation, and series 2 was already filmed. So it was so exciting to have that conversation with her. But what I want you to take away, the tip that I want you to take away, is that you should share your thought process with your audience. Share the thought process behind the steps in the journey of your story. So yes, the obvious takeaway with that story is, you have this hero's journey, and like in every novel, there's the beginning, the peak, which is the major obstacle that the person's facing and how they're going to fight through it. And then I don't know that you want to say that it goes all the way down, but it certainly maybe tapers out after that, because mission accomplished, yay, happy ending. So yes, you want to have that tension. That's very important. But a more nuanced, maybe tip that you've not heard before, is to share your thought process. So in Judge Carol's example, what this looked like was her explaining, okay, she heard all these no's, but she didn't just keep doing the same thing to get more no's, although some people could have done that. She assessed, okay, what could I do differently? What could I do better? And this is why she made those decisions. So it helped us to understand her better, which is why you're sharing your story, to promote understanding of your mission, of your service, of your brand, and also to understand what she's like. So imagine you and your clients that you're working with, they are going to want to understand your values, your thought processes, because that's going to impact them. So when you do that in a story, it gives them an insight into how your mind works, into your intellectual property, even your strategic strengths, and or your intuitive strengths or your faith-based strengths, whatever they may be, and does another job of differentiating you and strengthening the story. So those are my 3 storytelling tips for you. And now, well, let's reiterate them. So the first one was highlight challenges and sacrifices to make the narrative compelling. The second one was to use vivid imagery, to use details and descriptions to bring the story to life. And the third is to share your thought process where it's appropriate. Share what caused you to make certain decisions if that's a key part of the story, in order to help people to understand you and the way that your mind works. Now let's talk about the impact of the series on my community and on my brand. So yes, the stories were great. They were a fun part of my summer to interview these guests, to learn so much about them, and they were effective for my brand. So again, my goals for the series were to showcase these amazing entrepreneurs, to demonstrate the power of storytelling, and to raise my brand profile. So when it comes to demonstrating the power of storytelling and raising my profile, I had nearly 2,000 viewers, and we're still counting, but to date, I have nearly 2,000 people who tuned in during the series, which was incredible because I don't have a 2,000 person email list or 2,000 followers on my Instagram or Facebook or whatever. So for my organic audience, that was incredible. And my stats on LinkedIn were like, oh, your impressions are in the 1,000%, 2,000%. So in a way, this analysis is a little early because and sketchy, let's say, as in rough sketch, because I haven't yet gone through all of the data. And this is literally the last of the series. So we're still wrapping things up. But yes, nearly 2,000 people tuned in. I personally got new leads, which was great. A bonus, not one of my primary goals, but it was a bonus. And it was, what else did I write down? Oh, live participation and viewers. That was incredible to have people tuning in every single week and leaving comments and sharing with their audience. There you go. You know for sure that you've got emotional connections if people are resonating so much that they can't help but share. And then growth for me, again, on my YouTube subscriber side, on my Instagram side, on my LinkedIn side, lots of people were coming to my channels to learn about the guests and then seeing my work and wanting to stay around, wanting to hang around and be connected with me. And one of my guests has already been invited onto another podcast, thanks to her exposure on this series. And lots of people learned about new services. So people left comments like, oh, I didn't know so-and-so did such and such. I didn't know this was available. Or I didn't know this is where this person ended up, which is what you want. You want people to know what they don't know about you. They may know you already, which was the case for the commenters, actually. I know this because I know some of my guests pretty well. But you want people to learn something new and something that's relevant for them. So I didn't know, for instance, that James Virgil had a coin distribution bank. And that means that I can go use it, which means James can get clients, thanks to him coming and telling us his story of developing those coin machines. Like, perfect. So from a business perspective, I would say it was a success for me. It did all the things that I wanted it to do. It met and exceeded my expectations in terms of my own visibility and brand awareness. And then from a deeper community perspective, it demonstrated how when you share your stories, yes, you are attracting more people, you're getting lots of attention, but you're also bringing in people who are aligned to your mission and your values and your journey. And that's true for the new people who were drawn for the guests, who came to learn about the guests and wanted to stay. And for people who Now they knew me before, but they know me a little bit better, watching me ask questions and share, and just implicitly through the decisions that I made as I promoted the series. Now we are at the Q&A section. So if you're watching live and you want to drop a question in the chat, I'm looking around, I don't see any at the moment, but I have some questions on my desk that I'm going to answer live here for you. Lots of questions that people ask about storytelling. So the first one is, can storytelling principles work for industries that seem less personal, like tech or finance? Now that's a great question, because you would think, oh, well, stories are only going to be appropriate, let's say, for more emotional or personal arenas, like maybe you make candles or you sell stuffed toys or something like that. But the truth is, storytelling works for every industry and for every kind of business, whether you're a personal brand or a corporate brand. Because the goal with stories, as I mentioned earlier, actually, is to make an emotional connection. It's to use that emotional connection to create a human connection. And if you're doing it in a way that's not manipulative, that is honest, and if your goals are also honest, I think it's perfectly appropriate and necessary and sort of silly not to use stories to do that in order to further your mission, to win more clients, to build your brand awareness, and all that good stuff. So for instance, with tech, if you want to think about why was the product created and what issues did you have in development, those are the kinds of stories that you could tell to connect to your audience and to get them to be emotionally invested into what happened. When it comes to finance, you could, another angle for storytelling in these less personal industries is to, lean into your values or the values that people are looking for when it comes to those industries. So for finance, it would be trust and security and maybe confidentiality. So you could tell stories that demonstrate, either from a personal perspective, why that's so important to you or how it really mattered to you, or what that looks like when your clients work with you. What's the impact of that in an everyday sort of client relationship? So the short answer is, can storytelling work in more personal industries? Is yes. Now, another question I have on here is, what is a simple way to get started now? That is another great question, because it can be so easy to think, I have information and I know what to do, but I don't know when to do it. I'm waiting for the right time. And of course, the right time is today, is when you have a moment to reflect and to think, okay, this is what I'm going to do because I want to leverage stories, and now is the time. So, okay, I forgot the original question. What's a simple way to get started? Is to think of a story that you've never shared before that illustrates a core value or your mission, or maybe you haven't shared it in a long time. Let's say you shared it once 10 years ago. That's too long. Share it again. And it doesn't have to be a whole process. I recommend that you build it into your brand messaging. That's how I work with my clients. But when it comes to just practicing and leveraging the muscle, you think, okay, what's a story I haven't shared in a while that will tell my clients, tell my audience about me, and send it out in an email. Put it in make a story across your Instagram stories. There are lots of creative ways that you can do it, but that is what I would recommend, is to think of a story that helps people to understand your brand better and share it. Okay, and then the third question I have is, how do you balance personal stories with professional goals and services? And this, again, is another good question, because when a lot of people want to know, how do I share without maybe oversharing? Or how do I share, similar to the non-personal question, is like, is this relevant to my audience? Do they really care? Is this actually going to help me? Well, I think the series demonstrated that it will for sure help you. And the key question is relevancy. So there are actually three things that I want you to keep in mind when it comes to balancing the personal and the professional, the personal and the business in your goals. And the first one is who. So who are you talking to? Keeping your audience in mind is always, always, always the number one thing that you want to do. My background is as a writer, and that question, who am I writing to, is the one that helps me edit what I'm writing after I've already planned the writing, which also informs the planning of the writing, because who you're talking to changes everything. And one thing that it changes is how much you share, because you are not sharing to entertain the way you might with friends at a dinner party, and you're not sharing to get help the way you might with a therapist or a coach. You're sharing for a business reason, for a public profile reason. And so thinking about your audience keeps that sharing in check. And the second one is why. So the goal is so important because that will help you, again, decide what you're going to tell, which details to leave in, which details to leave out, and how you want to wrap up the story or segue the story into something else. Keeping the why is extremely important. And then similar to that is you want to be strategic and think about your boundaries, which is tied up to the audience. So your audience, keeping your audience in mind will help you not to overshare and not to ramble, I guess, off of your topic. And it will also help you to think about your boundaries. You can think about them more separately when you think, okay, this is the story that I want to share, and what's a strategic way to share this that I can leave out the details that maybe they're not so vulnerable, they're just not relevant, and they're not going to help you achieve your goals any better, faster, stronger, so you can leave them out. So you absolutely can balance the personal and the business or the public profile nature of your goals. And I will also add that this is subjective. So for some people, I mean, even everyone has different levels of boundaries. Just from the boundaries perspective, everyone has a different level of comfort, right? But when it comes to the someone else's comfort level, you can't use what they're sharing as a metric for what you are going to share or what you even need to share to be strategic. And I catch myself on the internet being like, oh wow, I can't believe that person did that, because I would never. But I share stories in my business all the time. I use stories in my branding. And then there are people, who share even less, I guess, but I wouldn't necessarily know because they're not sharing more than they are. And so my point is, you don't have to share your story like anybody else does. What you need to do, as I said, is keep your audience in mind, keep your goals in mind, and be strategic. So that's actually it. That's everything that I've got for you today. Thank you so much for tuning in to this finale episode. Again, let's revisit the 3 storytelling tips that I shared. The first one is to highlight challenges and sacrifices, because that keeps your, I was going to say readers, they might be reading, keeps your viewers, your audience engaged. Use vivid descriptions for the same reason. It helps people to imagine themselves in your world, and it brings the story to life. And share your thought process, because you also want to differentiate yourself from the way other people think, and you don't want to make assumptions. That's really important there as well. You don't want to assume that anyone, because we can't read each other's minds. So there's no way people could be 100% certain, even if they could guess why you did a certain thing. So you want to share your thought process, not only because it can demonstrate the positive things about working with you, the way that your mind works, but also because it eliminates confusion. And clarity is key when it comes to messaging and communicating of any kind, as we all know. You can view all 9 of the interviews. So I only talked about 3 and I mentioned a 4th today, but there are 9 interviews and they cover a variety of topics. My guests have brick and mortar businesses and virtual businesses. They have products, they have services, they work with educational materials, and they work in entertainment. So there's something in the series for everybody. And while I love all of the interviews and I encourage you to watch them all, I'm sure if you take a look, you'll find one that seems maybe more intriguing for you, and we'll see where it takes you next. And I would love to know what you thought about the series. So if you are watching on LinkedIn, all of the interviews are available on my profile. Same thing on YouTube. If you're watching on YouTube, they're all on my channel. And leave me comments. Let me know what were your takeaways, what were your favorite stories, your favorite moments, and let's keep the conversation going. I would love to get your feedback and to learn what this series has helped you to learn. And the last thing that I'll say is that if you are feeling inspired and motivated after this episode, after seeing the success and the excitement that was generated by this series with all the conversations and the sharing happening because of the interviews, and you're thinking about your story and how you can use it to leverage your brand even further, to take your work even further, then I would love to help you take that next step. And my one-on-one coaching, consulting, and writing services are designed to help you uncover your story and to leverage it to do just that, to strategically grow your brand, to increase your visibility, to reach more people, and to grow your audience so that you can work with more of the best people so that you can bring more aligned stakeholders into your audience, and so that you can do your work with more people, reach more people with your mission, have a bigger impact. That is what I want for you. And whether you are just starting out and you're not sure what your core stories are, this is the first time you heard of that word, that phrase, or whether you are a seasoned entrepreneur, a high-profile person in your community, and you are ready to launch a story-driven campaign to help you introduce a new chapter or to elevate your brand, to launch a new product, then my personalized services are designed to help you rise and shine. That is what I want for you. I want you to use your stories so that you become more visible and so that your work gets the platform and the attention that it deserves. If you're ready to do that, all you need to do is send me a DM. Whether you're on LinkedIn, on Instagram, I'm at Gabrielle Gwyneth. You can send me a DM and say, I'm ready to rise and shine. Or if you are watching on YouTube, in the description box, you'll find my email address. You can shoot me an email, say the same thing. We can talk. We'll set up a conversation so we can talk just about what it would look like for me to support you, what you exactly need next, and how I might best be able to help you get to that next level with your brand, using your stories and your messaging. So this marks the series finale, the end of the finale of the Summer of Stories. Thank you so much for joining me. Thank you to all of my guests who were brave and even went first for the first series in the Summer of Stories. And I will see you again soon. Ciao for now.